I'm not saying that you need to go searching for the problems, but if the triggers are happening in real time, then the problems are there and they're ready to be addressed. They're begging to be addressed. So can you allow yourself the permission to go there? To face these feelings, because I'm telling you, the dissonance between you and you is costing you so much energy. It's costing you your quality of life. And if you can bring these parts of yourself into alignment, if you can heal your inner child, if you can tame your ego, if you can allow your higher self to lead you with trust and love, and all of these pieces work together so beautifully, when that happens, the unity is really a beautiful thing. Welcome back to another episode of Initial Impressions. My name is Kayli Pommering and I'll be your host today. I am very excited for today's episode. As always, this show is dedicated to helping you feel more at peace, and I'm so grateful that you're taking time out of your busy schedules and out of your lives to spend some time with me, talking about the mind, talking about growth, expansion, all of the things. And I am excited to share with you my new psychology findings mixed with my life experience. Today's topic is going to be a heavy one. I'm just going to forewarn you. It's been a very emotional thing for me to learn about, and that is healing your inner child, understanding the four parts of your psyche. Are there other parts? Maybe, probably. But these are the parts that I'm learning about right now. And I've mixed them with some things that I have learned from other psychologists that I've researched. And I've also mixed them with my life experience and my own interpretation. Because at the end of the day, this show, it's about my experience of life and the things that I'm learning that are helping me and healing me. And I'm sharing them with you in hopes that it helps heal you too, and that you can mix it with your own perspectives and your own theologies. And if you ever have any interesting ideas and you just want to chat with me, I'm never bothered by that. That's why the podcast is called Initial Impressions, because these impressions, they adapt and they evolve with new data. So if you've got some new data, never be afraid to hit me up. I love to talk, to challenge beliefs, and to just have fun with it. So today's episode is going to be about the four parts of the psyche, understanding them, knowing when each one is speaking, how to recognize their voices, the roles that they play in our lives and the way that we show up, and how their separation impacts us. I've got them on my little note cards. I've got note cards today, guys. I'm a professional. All right. So we're going to start, but okay, let me just break it down a little bit for you, a little precursor. So, as I understand it now, there are four parts of the inner psyche. There is the higher self, the ego, the inner child, and then you as the observer. You as the observer is kind of like you in the present. They all, when working together and are unified, that's like the soul feels like, oh, we're all working together. Things are amazing. Like we're all being the most efficient versions of ourselves in like a beautiful way. And, they each serve a different purpose in our lives, and combined and on the same page. I mean, it's very powerful. It's very fulfilling. It's very liberating. You have more energy. You have more emotional capacity. You feel whole. You feel self-sufficient. You don't feel in a rush, but you feel at ease and flow. You feel confident. I mean, it's a wonderful state to be in. I know, because I realized I was not when I learned about these things. And within literally a couple months, I was able to really piece this together. And I'm going to explain more about my experience after I explain like what the hell I'm even talking about, because otherwise I feel like it's going to be a little confusing. So I did a lot of this work with my coach, which is how I was able to achieve these results. And it's been a wonderful process learning about these things. I'm so, so, so excited to share them with you. So I'm going to break down what each one of these parts of you are, what they sound like, and the role that they play. So I'm going to start off with inner child, and I'm going to read you what Carl Jung, he came up with the term in 1969. That was the earliest I could find that the inner child was described in this way. I'm sure the concept existed, somebody might have created it before that, but anyways, this is how he defines it. The inner child reflects the child we once were in both his or her negative and positive aspects. Both our unmet needs and suppressed childhood emotions, as well as our childlike innocence, creativity, and joy are still waiting within us. So your inner child, that's literally you as a kid. That's you as a kid. And I believe that everyone has an inner child because I don't think that anyone went through life without experiencing any type of discomfort or trauma. I think that everyone has kind of gone through something. Everyone's experienced something hard, and that might look different for all of us. I'm personally not one to say like, "Oh, like I went through worse." Like I don't really subscribe to that. Like everyone's pain tolerance is different also, and we all go through different things. And like, who am I to say that my hard was harder than your hard, right? So let's say you went through something traumatic and you weren't given the resources to know how to process that emotion. So a part of you gets fragmented, gets stuck in that negative emotion without the resources to know what to do about it, how to transmute it, how to come to its own solutions, to feel better. And this can happen a lot of ways, whether that is from your parents just not really teaching you how to emotionally regulate, or maybe even going as far as to give you traumatic beliefs that are really painful for you to believe about yourself, things that you were taught, like that was who you are, even if it wasn't. So lots of things can happen. And so here are 5 inner child wounds that I guess you could say are the most common. Maybe there are other ones as well, but rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, injustice. So these are the common ones. And these can show up in a lot of different ways in your life. But I would say the way I've noticed it the most is when a situation happens and I get triggered or really emotional. When it's like really emotionally stimulating and a strong negative emotion comes, I know that I have some kind of unresolved thing there. Something's not quite right because sometimes I'll go through a very challenging circumstance or someone will say something mean to me and it won't faze me at all. So, what exactly is causing it to bother me this specific time? That's not to say that what you're going through isn't valid or that it's unreasonable for you to be upset in the present moment, but what's up with the intensity of it? If you can hear me out. I'm not saying it's bad that you're feeling bad about something that's happening right now, but if it's hitting you like a ton of bricks, why is that? Because it's probably not just because of this particular situation. It's probably dating a little further back. Another definition for the inner child would be a part of your subconscious that was picking up messages and patterns before it was able to fully process what was going on emotionally and mentally. So if you were being told, how to believe, how to act, your subconscious forms these patterns of processing things a specific way. Now, if it wasn't the best way to process it, and you're still holding on to these processes because you've never really gone back to teach your inner child how it should be done now, that's what causes that kind of like automatic, triggered, like that response that maybe you don't even like, maybe that you don't feel like is the best way to react to these things, or that's just overwhelming. Maybe you just don't like the way it feels. Maybe you're just tired of getting such an overwhelming response from something that you can't control in your life, because you can't control the external world, but you can control the internal one. So if I can't make these people speak to me nicely, then I would love to find a way to not care so much when they don't. I'm going to give you a roundabout example for how an inner child sort of thing could happen. So let's say you're in school and you're studying all these different topics: history, English, whatever. Okay. And let's say all of your teachers are really, really good, except for one. One of your teachers doesn't know what they're doing. Let's say it's your math teacher. So your math teacher has no idea what he's doing and he's not very good at teaching you, and you don't really learn that much about math. And you keep kind of going and you're getting really intelligent in all these other areas, but math's just not your strong suit. And then as, time goes on, maybe you get other math teachers and you get enough to like get by, but you're just really not good at math still and you're like barely making it through, right? Now, let's say you're able to graduate, because you can definitely graduate by coasting. I have seen that happen. And you're still really not good at math, right? Doesn't mean that you're necessarily not going to be successful in other areas, but you could be 25, successful in a lot of ways, and a math problem comes in front of you and you have no clue how to solve it. Now, this becomes an issue when it's not math and it's emotional intelligence because your emotions, it's not like math where it's kind of a little more isolated into one little box. Your emotions, that is seeping into every part of your life. So if you have a lack of emotional intelligence, that's nothing to feel bad for. It's nothing to feel guilty for in any way. Most of us were not taught like jack shit about emotions, okay? Like there's not a class in it in school. If somebody has a school and they're teaching emotional intelligence in a class, like that is a dream. I hope to be a part of facilitating that in the future. Hopefully it exists somewhere. But knowing what to do with our emotions, we weren't really taught a lot about how to do that. And a lot of our parents just kind of guessed. They thought if they shamed us into doing things that we would be better, or if they, made us feel like we had to be perfect, or if they were just neglectful in general. All types of emotional wounds can come from all types of behaviors. Maybe your parents were really nice and really, really successful and provided you with a good life, but they were absent. Maybe they preferred other people over you, and that made you feel rejected. And now rejection is really triggering for you, and you have a habit of feeling rejected easily or taking it really, really personally when you are rejected. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing to learn how to release? For it to not bother you so much anymore. And this could go for so many different, I listed off five: the abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and justice. If one of these in particular kind of screams out at you as something that you struggle a lot with, maybe it's a little bit of all of them. I mean, for me, I've struggled with, I would say, a little bit of all of them. Now, mind you, my childhood was a bit messy, but that's neither here nor there. God, this has been a journey for me. I swear, going into these, it is hard, but I promise you, it is worth the work of facing these uncomfortable emotions. The weight off my shoulders, guys, phenomenal. So it's worth it to go back and learn math because you might be 25 and your math skill might be at elementary functions, and you might be 25 and your emotional intelligence or your emotional fulfillment might be at elementary functions. And that is not something to feel bad for. So don't feel guilty. This is where reparenting comes into play. So, what is reparenting? Basically, if we were taught a process that's not serving us today, we're going to go back and we're going to teach our inner child a new process. And we're going to do that because in the last, let's say if our inner child shows up to us as an age that was traumatized at 7, 10, 15, 12, it could be any age. Maybe it's multiple ages. For me, sometimes it shows up as multiple ages. And there was a way that she was taught that was poorly done. Maybe I wasn't taught how to give myself approval or how to meet my own emotional needs. Okay, well, what does that look like now? With my elevated awareness as an almost 25-year-old, how would I explain to a kid now how to regulate their emotions? What would I say to her? What would I say to her when she's wanting the approval of someone else? How would I encourage her? How would I comfort her? Can you begin facilitating these conversations with yourself to where you can, okay, where is this humiliation coming from? What need is not being met here? Now, I'm speaking of it a little vaguely because until I get into the other parts of you, it's a little harder to get into this. So I will say this though, your triggers are going to be very revealing for you, or your emotional like pain points. When something happens and it makes you really, really upset, write down the key words on how it's making you feel emotionally, because that is going to be so, so telling on how it's holding you back. I noticed for myself that I had a real issue with being imperfect. I really thought that I was like, should be this like perfect being, right? And that was infecting so many areas of my life that I'm like baffled. And it had the complete opposite effect. I was having a harder time, working on my problems because I didn't want to face them, because by facing them, it was making me more imperfect. And the emotional judgment that I carried towards myself for not being perfect. And I mean, some of the most trivial ways I was really tearing myself up about. And it would happen so quick, so fast. So part of slowing the process down is just acknowledging the feelings, being okay with experiencing negative emotion, acknowledging that you're not the feeling, that it's just a vibration going through you. It's an energy going through you. It's an experience, but you are the experiencer, not the experience. Let's move on to the next part of your psyche. Let's talk about the ego. The ego sees through the eyes of self, the eyes of I. It can be very short-sighted, but it is your protector. It's your survivor mentality. It's the part of you that wants to fight or flight. It's the part of you that hates uncomfortable things, uncomfortable experiences, uncomfortable emotions, that wants to protect you as much as it possibly can. But the problem is that because it only sees through self, it's very, very short-sighted, and it can be lacking a lot of perspective. It can be lacking guidance. It can be lacking awareness of others. So sometimes what it does to protect us is actually not helpful for us in the long term. And that's really important to note because the shame, the judgment, that typically comes from the ego. It thinks that it's forcing us to improve, or it will be avoidant, neglectful, will avoid that part of you. For me, my ego really did not want me to pay attention to my inner child. My ego was just like, don't entertain that mess. Like, she's very upset. That's really heavy. Like, let's stay away from her. She's got a lot to unpack. And so my brain just would kind of like default shift, like try to think about something else. And here I thought that I was being positive. It kind of tricked me into a lie. And the results were what let me know that, because clearly some things that matter if I keep hitting a wall where I'm having a hard time progressing past, or if I still feel like there are times where I'm the victim of my emotions. And that's what we don't want to be. We don't want to be the victims to our own self-shame, self-judgment. Like, that's not the way to live. That's not a fun quality of life. We want more for ourselves. And ego can also show up as self-sabotage, where it thinks that it's protecting us from disappointment by not allowing us to even go there at all. Like, no, you can't have that. Like, let's just stay away from that. What if you lose it? Like, what if it's going to cause you more discomfort in the future? No, I don't want to get your hopes up. Like, it's the play it small mentality. That's what your ego is. Now, I'm saying all these things, it makes it sound like your ego is a bad thing, but it's not. Your ego, to me, it's like brute strength vibes, right? Like, your ego has the capability to really protect you, but without proper guidance, it just doesn't do it in the best ways. Left to its own devices, the ego is not the sharpest tool in the shed, okay? So when you can use your ego and you can guide it, it can become a very helpful thing, like a warrior of sorts, if you will. The best person to direct your ego, though, is your higher self. So if there's your inner child, there's the ego, there's you as the observer watching it all play, and then there's your higher self. The hard part, though, about dealing with an untamed ego is that it always wants to be right. And the higher self, she doesn't care about being right. She knows she's right. So she's quiet. She is patient. She's not in a rush. But your ego doesn't really have that philosophy, okay? Your ego is going to be loud. It's going to be a little obnoxious sometimes, and it's going to make it kind of hard for you to hear your higher self. And that's where you have to learn how to tame the ego, to tame the judgment, to tame the shame, so you can hear the elevated truth. If it's harder for you to imagine a higher self, then think of like the next level version of you, the mature you, the part of you that is goodness and love and connected to God or your higher power or infinite intelligence, whatever it is that you believe in. And so if you want to be able to hear that voice of truth and reasoning and love, then we got to learn how to tame the ego. So I wrote down a couple statements that I can say to myself sometimes to help me to calm my ego down when it's being particularly judgmental or shameful. So let's say if my ego is being loud and noisy, then sometimes I'll say, I'm safe to experience these emotions. I'm not in danger, but thank you for trying to protect me. I know you want me to improve, but I don't need shame or judgment to do that. I am not this feeling, I'm the experiencer of it. So these are just some statements that I say to myself when the ego is getting a little loud. So let's say to show you in real time how this might play out. Situation happens. It elicits a strong negative emotion and you're overcome by it. You start to think about that emotion and your ego says, no, avoid that, go do XYZ instead, deflect. Maybe it says blame it on them. Maybe it says, it could say a plethora of things, anything to get you to avoid feeling the gravity of that negative emotion. And what you really need to do right now is allow yourself to feel it, to transmute the energy so you can figure out what it needs from you. So that's when these statements can become helpful. When the ego is going crazy and you really just want to see what's up, you want to see what's going on emotionally, and you're so tempted to run from it, these are the things that I say. Sometimes even my coach one time, he was like, because I was kind of meditating while we were doing this, walking through this process, which is just such a beautiful process. And I'm so excited that I've learned this and I'm continuing to learn more about it so I can facilitate this process for the people that I coach. But I remember this strong negative emotion came up and I just was like, I feel super afraid right now of this feeling. Like I feel super afraid of it. It's really hard for me to let myself feel it. And he was like, okay, open your eyes, look around. Are you in danger? And I was like, no, I'm not in danger. And then it kind of just clicked. And I was like, wow, I'm perfectly safe right now. It's just a feeling. And, for some people, maybe that were raised to allow themselves to embrace their emotions and work through them. And that's such a beautiful thing. And I can't wait one day when I have kids to be able to hold that space for them. But that really wasn't the space that I had growing up. I really wasn't aware that it was safe to just feel them and to allow yourself. That energy is not going to hurt you. It's just a feeling, and it's a feeling that has needs that have been neglected. So once the ego calms down, we're able to listen to the inner child without judgment a little better. It still might come up, but when it does, calm it down again. There's no place for judgment and shame here. It's not necessary. It's not going to help us in our growth. Actually, it's going to do the opposite. So once the inner child, if it's confusing for you to actually visualize an inner child, see, I'm a very visual person. For me, this was a very visual and audible process, but I have also spent like the last 5 years meditating and doing visualizations, and I read a lot. So I'm really good at like picturing things. So when I was going through this process and the negative emotion came up, it was very quick for me to actually visualize my inner child. But if that's not your experience, like there's nothing wrong with you. Everybody's process is different. Some people don't visualize anything at all. Some people, it's just an emotional thing, or it's an audible thing where you can like hear the inner child. It's okay. If it takes you some time to connect to it, and maybe you're new to this kind of work, like do not feel like something's wrong with you or that you're supposed to see something. It's not necessarily that way. So whether that's you addressing your inner child or you addressing this strong negative emotion, whatever that shows up for you. For me personally, when I first dove into this work, I mean, I feel like I dove in head first. Like I was meditating, being walked through this visualization, and I see my inner child. And this is like a super vulnerable thing for me to share, but I really feel I put my whole heart in here, okay? I literally put my whole heart in here. So when I visualized my inner child, like it was in complete darkness. And I was at the moment, a really triggering emotional thing had happened recently, right before the call. So it was perfect timing for me to be really accessible to this emotion. And when I saw my inner child, I was like walking into like pitch blackness, and I could just see me, probably about like 10 or 12 years old. And I was like naked and curled up in a ball, like on the floor, just like completely isolated, traumatized, like not not well. Like this is very personal in my heart. I'm sharing with you guys. I love you guys and I like want to help facilitate as much healing in this world as I possibly can. And so I'm sharing this with you. And that was like very sobering for me. I was like, whoa. Like I thought I've processed the things that I've went through, but on like a really intrinsic level, I clearly have not. So I think what was happening for me, and the reason why I've been able to achieve a lot of growth, is because I have connected to my higher self to where, like, I know what the truth is. I know who I really am, what I'm worth. But the part of my soul, me as a kid, that got traumatized and didn't really receive that type of validation or answers was really, really pushed away, locked away in a corner, completely unaddressed, alone, and hasn't learned everything that I've learned and needed to be reparented, needed things to be explained to her, that she was safe, and a plethora of things. I mean, me and girlfriend had a lot of things to talk about. So when the strong native emotion comes up and you're feeling it and you go into this state, I remember when I first saw my inner child, there was a part of my ego that literally was like, run. This is about to be so heavy. But I was like, no, I'm safe. I'm ready to face this. I'm ready to face these negative emotions. They can't hurt me. Things are going to be unlocked here, realized, more deeply understood about myself. This is a really beautiful part of the process. So I visualized asking, what are you feeling? What are you afraid of? And it takes time for this to become a super fluid conversation. There's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of fear, a lack of trust. I mean, if there's a part of you that you've literally pushed away for like over a decade, like there's some lack of trust there because she's been locked away in a corner, or he's been locked away in a corner, been neglected and avoided. That's not a fun feeling. And so there is a trust that has to be rebuilt there between you and you. So the conversation looks like, though, what are you feeling? What are you afraid of? How would that make you feel? If you needed something to feel better or to be healed, what would it be? And then can you meet that need? So, where it can get challenging though is maybe you don't have a super good relationship with your higher self to know what the truth is here, to know what that next level version of you would say. How would you respond to that child that's in front of you? If it wasn't you, if it was somebody else that needed love and support, how would you give that? What would that look like? What would that validation look like? What would the comfort look like? What would rebuilding trust look like? In order for this to work, you have to be willing to allow yourself to really go there, to accept that there are these parts of you and it doesn't make you crazy that you have them. And that sometimes it's going to be more accessible when you're in a more relaxed state. And for me, that's in meditation, breath, taking deep breaths is incredibly motivating and stabilizing. But when you're looking for the truth, when you're looking for, okay, what does comforting her look like? That's when calling on your higher self. That's where the higher self comes into play. So your higher self, like I said before, I mean, we're talking about goodness, love, kindness, compassion, grace, no rush to make you better, no shame or judgment for where you are, who allows you to experience things good, bad, and different that it believes is going to contribute to you finding your alignment with yourself. That's going to contribute to growth and healing in the end. So sometimes uncomfortable experiences, for me, I've started to really appreciate them because when a trigger has came up in the past couple weeks for me, I've known exactly what to do with it. And I'm like, oh wow, I'm so grateful that this little annoyance or this thing happened that really wasn't a big deal, but triggered a really big thing. I'm so glad it happened because I was able to really get to the root of this time. I finally understood what the process would look like to get to the root of it. And so sometimes in these moments it can be helpful to ask your higher self what wisdom she has to share with you, what truth. What truth would be helpful to know? What does she think my inner child needs to know right now? Asking if your higher self is here with you. If that's harder for you to connect to, like I said, there's other verbiage. It doesn't have to be higher self. If it's easier for you to think of this, more mature version of you or an elevated version of you, or maybe even for you to look at your higher self as God itself. Not to say that like you are God, but like if you believe in God, maybe for you, that's like what that is. To me, it's like my higher self is the part of me that's connected to God, that's connected to infinite intelligence of all of humanity's beautiful brains and all of our higher selves all connected together. I don't know what happened to my light. Oh, I think it died. Brief intermission. I had to switch out my lights because the one died, but that's okay. But yeah, I look at it as my higher self is the part of me that's connected to God and knows the truth and knows that I'm worthy and that I'm good enough and knows all of these beautiful truths about ourselves. And so when you're struggling to know what to say, sometimes it's helpful to call on your higher self and say, okay, what is the truth here? Maybe it looks like this. Maybe it looks like a negative emotion, your ego telling you to run, you telling your ego to chill out. Then your inner child, you asking it, what's wrong? What do you need? Maybe it says, no, I don't feel like I'm worthy. I'm not worthy. And then maybe your higher self, you ask her, okay, well, what is the truth here? And your higher self says, you are worthy. And whoever told you that was never qualified to say that. And it's just allowing yourself to continue having these conversations until your inner child goes, for me, curled up in a ball naked on the floor, so sad, to sitting up and just like listening, and then being standing and being skeptical, and then holding my hand, and then trusting me completely. And then it felt like at some point everything snapped together and I didn't really feel so separate anymore. And it felt like all the parts of me were finally working together. And truthfully, I hit that like epiphany this week. So I've been feeling pretty incredible since that. So I'm very, very grateful. I feel like I can feel as the whole process goes, and I'm sure things will happen and I'll still have to work through triggering emotions. It's not like you do it once and it's just over with forever. But streamlining this process so you know what to do when the triggers come up and kind of backdating, right? Like there's some shit that we went through as kids that needs to be addressed. And I'm not saying that you need to go searching for the problems, but if the triggers are happening in real time, then the problems are there and they're ready to be addressed. They're begging to be addressed. That's why it gets so loud sometimes when these negative things happen. So can you allow yourself the permission to go there, to face these feelings because I'm telling you, the dissonance between you and you is costing you so much energy. It's costing you your quality of life. It's costing you a lot. And if you can bring these parts of yourself into alignment, if you can heal your inner child, if you can tame your ego, if you can allow your higher self to lead you with trust and love, and all of these pieces work together so beautifully, and you, as the observer, your job is to help facilitate all of this happening. When that happens, the unity is really a beautiful thing. And I know that this can be a lot. It can be really heavy, challenging. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the most vulnerable podcasts I've shared, honestly, because yeah, it was for me like to finish the rest of my visualization. So I described how my inner child was. And then, which by the end, she was wearing like a flowy chiffon dress, like, period. And then, which I think must, because your inner child too is not just the pain. Now that I've worked through some of her pain, I'm starting to find some of her pleasures again, like the things that really brought her a lot of joy. And it indicates some stuff that I want to make sure I incorporate into my life today, and the creativity and the expression and the poetry and the flow and the beauty. And I loved all those things growing up, and I loved just all of that. So it's helping to remind me of those other passions and bringing them back into my life today because they did bring me joy. And then my ego, I visualized it as like a warrior, as a protector with like armor on, literally just me, but like armored up. Beautiful sight. And then my higher self looked kind of like ethereal, glowing, radiant, relaxed, free, beautiful clothes that were just flowy and yeah, beautiful things. And for all of us, I think these things are going to look different. And like I said, maybe for you, you won't get visuals. I'm just a visually oriented person, I think. So I hope this stuff was helpful. It's tempting for me to want to keep these things private because I know that maybe not everyone will understand exactly what I'm saying or be at a place where they're ready to understand. But I'm just going to be vulnerable. I'm just going to be vulnerable. So this has been my experience, and it has literally changed my life. And I feel infinitely lighter and aligned and brave and happy and fulfilled. And like I'm exactly at the right place at the right time. And I want everyone in the world to feel like that with all my heart. And so that's why I'm sharing this, with you. So I hope it was helpful, and I hope that you enjoyed spending some time with me today, and that you can set aside some time to dig a little deeper into these emotions. And if you're having a hard time doing it by yourself, I'm so glad that I hired a coach to help me learn how to do these things, because I absolutely love doing this work with my clients now. Bringing this into my coaching sessions has brought me so much joy to see it unlock things in the people that I'm working with. And if you think you could benefit from this kind of work, if maybe you spend a lot of your time feeling chaotic or emotionally triggered, or like you're constantly like in an internal discourse with yourself and you don't really know what's next for you and you feel a lot of shame and judgment. I mean, this can look like a lot of things. If you're struggling with feeling a little bit all over the place, kind of confused by your own self, I understand you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's just a little part of you that needs some extra love. And if you think that it would be helpful for you to do it alongside a coach that can help walk you through these processes, that has learned about these things, and can help you kind of bridge the gaps when those walls come up, to find a point of entry where you can really face these things and allow yourself to go there, I would absolutely love and be honored to facilitate you in doing that kind of work. So if that's something that interests you, I will put my website in the podcast description, so you could click the link there and you could fill out the little form. I have a little form on there if you want to work with me, and we can get on the phone and just talk for a bit. Just talk and see if we're compatible. It's no pressure. I want to make sure that it feels super aligned and like the right decision for both of us. So if you are interested, don't hesitate to reach out. It's also in my Instagram, Kayli_Jane_Pommering. I will put that in the description as well, because I'm not going to spell that all out. I got a long name, guys. But I think that's it, guys. That's a wrap. So I hope that you have a great week and that you are leaving more at peace than you came.